I've seen a lot of people lately citing research that uses electromyography or EMG to determine which muscles or which parts of muscles are working harder for a given exercise or exercise variation. How it works is the EMG device measures electrical activity in your muscles. So the more electrical activity produced by a certain muscle, a certain part of your muscles, the more that muscle's working. This is all fine and dandy on its face and probably useful for diagnosing dysfunction and assessing the efficacy of a given exercise or exercise variation on an individual basis. However, I've got beef with all the dogmatic, irrational extrapolation I see from the science-based clowns on here, using EMG data to tell me and other lifters that, for example, if I do a lat pull down with my hands wider than shoulder width, I'm actually activating my teres major, not my lower lats. And it doesn't matter how I grip the bar, I can't activate my lower lats at all. This line of thinking is stupid. It lacks nuance and is wrong. First, there is no universal imperative that demands when a human being learns a new physical task that he or she learns how to perform it in the most biomechanically efficient way possible, with the proper muscles firing in the ideal sequence, with the perfect timing to execute the movement with the least energy usage possible. Fortunately, this isn't how it works at all. In fact, you can see examples of us learning to do things in a way that's biomechanically inefficient in infants learning to walk. That's right. The cruelty of nature is such that, as an infant, if you develop a super inefficient walking gait, eventually that will lead to joint problems down the road. God is good, huh? Anyways, the point is that the same task can be performed by two different people in completely different ways with completely different muscle activation patterns. Think deadlifting with your back versus deadlifting with your hamstrings and glutes. My second point is we all have unique anatomies. This can contribute to different muscle activation patterns and muscle usage for two different people for the same exercise. For example, someone with really long femurs is going to have more back muscle activation when they perform a back squat because they are going to have to lean forward more to achieve depth to compensate for the length of their femurs. Different limb ratios and muscle attachment points can make the same exercise a very different exercise for two different people depending on the criteria we're using to deem a proper lift. So, when someone tells me I need to do this row variation to target this part of my lats, I do not give a shit. We all have unique limb ratios, leverages, and ingrained muscle activation patterns that impact these things, that impact the muscle activation you're using for any given exercise. Additionally, sometimes it just takes practice to flex and use a certain muscle on command. Think about it. Everyone knows how to flex your biceps because you learned how to do that as a kid. But if I were to tell you to flex your teres major, only a seasoned gym veteran would be able to do that. Getting good muscle activation for a specific area isn't going to magically happen because you found some secret version of rows or leg presses or whatever. You need to practice building a mind-muscle connection and better overall body awareness to determine and dictate the efficacy of a given exercise or exercise variation. Your subjective experience and what you feel while you're exercising is more valuable in telling you how effective your exercise is than EMG data from some random stranger who was told how to do an exercise improperly by a researcher who's barely touched a gym. I don't personally need an EMG to tell me which muscles are working or which parts of my muscles are working. I can tell, and so can you. EMG data is just not super helpful or not nearly as important as your subjective experience and what you feel when you're exercising.